Hi guys, happy Friday. Today we're going to read the next two chapters of Lions at Lunchtime. So I know that there was a lot of action and adventure that happened in chapters 3 and 4 that you heard today. So we're going to find out a little bit more about what happens next. So chapter 5 is called Ha Ha. Oh no, 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 shouted Annie. She raced down the bank until she reached a sandy clear spot. Here, here, she called. So, as you're hearing all the excitement of the beginning of this chapter, just remember that when we left off with chapter 4, Annie had just gotten out of the quicksand and she was worried that the wildebeest were going to follow her to that same spot. The wildebeest followed her with their wild eyes. Jack watched in disbelief as the swimmers changed their course. Slowly, all the wildebeest swam to where Annie stood. She waved them in like a traffic policeman. I like that simile there. Jack grabbed his backpack. Annie, he cried, let's go before we get trampled. Keep it up, she shouted to the wildebeest as she took off after Jack. They ran farther up the river, away from the incoming wildebeests. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. They looked back. Everything seemed fine. The wildebeests were scrambling safely over the riverbank. Soon they would graze on the grass prepared by the zebras. Good work, Jack said to Annie. Thanks, she said. Okay, now for our riddle. No, first we've got to get clean, said Jack. You look like you're in a mud suit. High-pitched laughter rang through the air. It sounded mocking and mean. Jack turned around. They saw two spotted brown animals standing in the tall grass. The creatures had bodies like dogs, but with sloping backs. They laughed again. Ha ha, said Annie. You don't look so great yourself. What are they? Said Jack. He took out the book. He tried not to get mud on it as he looked for a picture. When he found it, he read aloud. And before I read it, just start to think of what animal I might be describing. On the African plains, the hyena, and there's that pronunciation again, so we know we don't have to read it twice. The hyena is the ruling predator after the lion. It makes a sound similar to a high pitched human laugh. What's predator mean? Said Annie. It means it catches things and eats them, said Jack. Oh, said Annie. Yuck. The two hyenas laughed again, and they moved closer to Jack and Annie. Quietly, Jack read more. The hyena has a reputation for being a thief and a coward. Let's see if they're cowards, whispered Annie. Let's try to scare them. The hyenas laughed and moved a little closer. How? Jack asked. Act like a monster, said Annie. Now! Jack and Annie made terrible monster faces. They put out their hands and rushed at the hyenas. Ah! They shouted. The hyenas yelped and scurried off. Scaredy cats, Annie shouted after them. Come on, said Jack. Annie and Jack took off in the other direction. They ran around a bend in the river. They heard the hyena laughter again, but it sounded far away. Good, he said. They're gone. Hey, maybe we can wash over there, said Annie. She pointed to the edge of the forest. There was a small pond surrounded by tall grass. Zebras were drinking the water. Yeah, said Jack. If it's safe enough for them to drink. The zebras ignored them as they walked toward the pond. When they reached the edge of the water, Jack set his heavy pack down in the dry grass. He glanced around. No lions were in sight, but then he heard something. On the far side of the pond, something very big was coming out of the trees. Yikes! So before we start on chapter 6, just start to think about some of the animals that might be in Africa. What might be big coming out of the trees coming toward them? I wish I could hear your predictions. We'll find out. Ready? Chapter 6 is called Spick and Span. Be still, said Jack. Jack and Annie stood frozen as an elephant stepped out of the shadows. It waded into the pond and dipped its trunk into the water. Oh, wow, said Annie. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. An elephant wasn't going to chase them and eat them. Still, the elephant was huge. Let's sneak away, said Jack. But I want to watch, said Annie. Fine, said Jack. He was tired of Annie getting sidetracked. I'm going to solve the riddle by myself. I'll meet you back at the treehouse. He turned to go. A spray of water rained down on him. It came from behind. He shouted with surprise and looked back. The elephant's trunk was pointed straight at Annie. Cool, she cried. He's giving me a shower. The elephant sprayed her again, then again. The mud slowly rolled off her face, her braids, her t-shirt, her shorts, her legs, and her sneakers. I guess the elephant doesn't like dirty kids, said Annie, laughing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Finally, she was clean and soaking wet. Now it's your turn, she said to Jack. Jack stepped forward and shut his eyes tight. A blast of water hit him. It did feel like a shower, a strong shower. When Jack was clean, the elephant let out a grunt. Then he started to splash himself with water. Thanks, said Annie. Yeah, thanks, said Jack. I'm spick and span now, said Annie. When the sun dries me off, I'll be like new. Good, said Jack. Now we can get serious. He picked up his heavy pack. We have to figure out the answer to the riddle so we can leave this place before we run into real trouble. He looked around nervously. Where are the lions? He wondered. A small bird flitted near his head. Hi, Annie said to the bird. Jack turned back to her. According to the riddle, we're looking for something gold and sweet. What do you want? Annie asked the bird. The bird twittered and flew around Jack and Annie. Its feathers were a dull gray, but it had a bright, happy manner. Annie, listen to me, not the bird, said Jack. The bird kept fluttering around them. She's trying to tell us something, said Annie. Jack let out a long sigh. Oh, you're driving me crazy today, he said. But I feel like she needs our help, said Annie. Maybe her babies fell out of the nest. Annie, you can't save every animal in Africa, said Jack. This bird is important, said Annie. Trust me. The bird darted toward the trees. It landed on a branch and cocked its head at them. She says, follow, said Annie. The bird headed into the forest. Annie started after it. Don't go in there, said Jack. You might run into... There was no need to finish. The bird and Annie had disappeared into the trees. A snake or a lion, Jack said to himself. Come on, Annie called. Jack moaned. He pulled on his pack and ran. The peanut butter jar thumped against his back. So that's where we end chapter 6. So we met some new animals today, the hyena, an elephant. We still haven't found the lions, so I'm a little bit worried about when they might pop up. But now all of a sudden, Jack and Annie have met this bird, so I have a feeling this bird might be pretty important. So, since we finished those last 2 chapters, your job is to summarize them. So it says, think about what has happened in the last 2 chapters. Summarize by only including the main events. Remember that this is not the time to use quotes or something specifically that Jack or Annie said from the book. A summary should be a paragraph of about 4 to 5 sentences that quickly recaps what has happened. So some of you are still having some trouble with summarizing. I'm noticing that they're either too short or in some cases, they're actually too long. So remember that when you're summarizing, you're not sharing every single detail. We shouldn't hear specific things that Jack or Annie said. Those are the quotes. You're really just giving like a quick, like if somebody were to pop into your house and said, oh, what chapters did you read? And you only had a minute to tell them what was happening. You would just kind of just quickly give them an idea of what happened. So it should only be 4 or 5 sentences. Okay, so you're going to summarize. And then we're still not doing our research yet, but I want you to really start thinking about those research topics. Some of the animals that we've heard now are the zebra, gazelle, wildebeest, lion, hyena, vulture, giraffe, and elephant. And this new gray bird that we haven't heard too much more about yet. And some of the places that were mentioned were the continent of Africa and then some of the countries within it. Tanzania, Kenya, and then the Mara River, which is the river that the animals were crossing that Annie helped with. So think about what you might like to research. Some of you might have already done that and you were settled on it yesterday. And then using those possible topics, you're going to go into your next activity, which is Padlet. So it says, choose an animal or place that was discussed in the book, Lions at Lunchtime, that you would like to learn more about. Oh, I'm going to put another comma there. See how I pause? Choose an animal or place that was discussed in the book, Lions at Lunchtime, that you would like to learn more about. That sounds better. Write what you already know about that animal or place. Then draw a picture of it and add it to your post using your webcam. So remember that you're already just thinking about what you know. I want to know what your schema is about the animal or place that you choose. And then once we start to research, then you can add some more facts. Okay, so that's it for tomorrow. Other than your reading, remember that every day you're still supposed to be reading for 30 minutes so that your vocabulary grows, so that your minds grow, make sure that you are reading every single day for 30 minutes. Okay, guys? Can't wait to see your work today.